Okay, today I'm speaking to Tommie Kelly. Hi, Tommie.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, actually.
Good.
Thrilled that you're on the show.
It's great to be here. Yeah, and thanks very much for asking me. I appreciate it.
No, it's great. It's great. I'm always pleased when people say yes, actually.
But, yeah, it took me a while. I've been kind of a bit busy recently, but we got here. It's only a couple of weeks since you asked me. So
no, that's
good, not too bad, I suppose.
That's all right. That's good. Yeah. So my sort of traditional first question is, what do you do?
Right. Okay. So let me see. I suppose we'll do the big answer. In that I've done many things that kind of have separate eras over my life, but have all kind of come together recently, I suppose. So I kind of do everything again. So I suppose the best way to do it is to start of what I first did and work up to the good. Yeah. So the very first thing I did, I've always been kind of creative. That's just like, even as a kid, I was more interested in kind of, I suppose, making my own versions of toys than, the real toys, and had more fun. Right. And since I got the real version of it, I kind of lost interest in it. So it was just kind of drive to create. And when I was quite young, my cousin was big into comics. I'm quite young, like I would have been like sneaking into his room reading his Warrior and his 2080, and really shouldn't have been. I was like 8 or 9 reading V for Vendetta and Watchmen or these type of things. But he was a really, really good artist. He still is, like I said, he's dead. He's still drawing, still does comics, still all the thing. And so that really got me to kind of I suppose the lust for comics and drawing, and that kind of got set in my mind. So that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be just like my cousin. I wanted to be a comic artist. That's so as I got it more into my kind of early teens, I've tried to develop that. Now, it wasn't particularly good, and I suppose you can't really be particularly good when you're kind of that young, because you have to spend a number of years doing things, unless you're some sort of prodigy, and I'm certainly not a prodigy. But I was always kind of a bit better than the people around me, or whatever. But when I got to secondary school, my art teacher just wasn't into comics at all, and wasn't a particularly good. Wasn't a good art teacher in the sense of I didn't learn anything from him. Like, I spent 5 years, 2 hours a week at his company, and I didn't learn anything about figure drawing. I didn't learn anything about the kind of the techniques that you can teach anyone with regard to the actual things that you can learn about, say, figure drawing or anatomy or shading, whatever. And his whole approach was more just to, I say, I don't know how to draw hair. We'll just sit down and draw hair for, the next 2 weeks. And you go, well, that's not helping anyone. There's actual rules that you could, I assume you just didn't know them. But at the same time, he was a qualified art teacher, so he had to have gone to college. And, so someone, he either, he must have known them and just decided not to, for whatever reason, not to teach them. But he really wasn't into comics, and he really sort of didn't, I suppose, nurture me in the way that I probably would have needed. And that's not his fault. That's not anyone's fault. That's just that's what I would have wanted. So my interest in art kind of started fading away, because it wasn't being kind of nourished, I suppose, is the same way. But I also noticed that the art is kind of the nerdy, geeky thing, and it was already kind of a naive nerd type thing, not particularly popular. And I noticed that there was this kind of aura around, say, playing the guitar that seemed to lend people this specialness. So I goes, yes. let's have a look at this and see what happens. So it was at that point, I suppose, about 14, 15, that my dad's a musician, and he plays guitar, and there's always been music in the house. But I actually started first on bass, and then after a couple of months, I just said, no, I'll have a guitar, please. And then I was just into music. That was it. The kind of art fell from the wayside, and it was all into wanting to be a rock star. Yeah, so I'd say I started playing guitar. It's 15, 16, something like that. And then kind of what happened then with the art was that I was kind of touching in and out, but it still obviously had to still do it for school, it's still part of the thing. And when it came to the final exams, it was kind of, the teacher was telling me, if you do the final exams with your art and the way you want to do it, you're not going to do it particularly well. So what you should do is the standard type stuff and just, do your, get your thing. And I was going like, well, I'm not doing that. So I did the art, the final exams my way, and I got like a C3, which wasn't particularly good. But about 3 weeks later, I got a phone call saying, there's been a tremendous mistake. You actually got an A1, and I was in like, it was the top 5% of the, an A1 is like the top 5% of the thing. So that I felt quite vindicated, and I won that battle, art teacher, but there was a good lesson in that, to be true to yourself and not, but it was easier, I suppose, in that I didn't need to get a good grade. I wasn't going to art college, so it was easier to gamble on doing your own thing when you don't really have something to lose out of it other than some sort of pride around the thing. So then after that, I suppose I just spent the next 15 years trying to be a rock star in many different things, being in a bands, doing solo stuff, singer-songwriter type stuff, recorded a number of albums. Mostly what happened was I ended up being a sound engineer, which was, it's like that kind of job that you end up doing that is close to what you want to do, but not really. And so, it was, I really disliked it, like that's kind of like, there was obviously some great fun and there was, great times and all that, but as an overall thing, I disliked it because it was close to what I wanted to do, but you were the person who was making other people have the job that you want, and which is, it's no fun on many levels. So out of that kind of whole thing, I was towards the end of my 20s. I was completely burnt out. I'd been like touring a lot with cover bands and tribute bands, and so it wasn't even like there was no original creativity kind of stuff going on at all. It was literally, you're doing sound for bands, we're doing other people's music, which for what it is, it's all fine. But and there's, it's my own bands and my own kind of songwriting stuff and all that. I kind of got a bit disillusioned with it because, when you suddenly realize that you're probably not going to be a rock star, then you kind of go, all right, maybe one, I'm not that good. You have to kind of come that you're not good enough. Or, there's so many amazing people who, much better than I who still don't make it, so you kind of get this whole disillusionment or whatever. And I knew that if I continued being a sound engineer, that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. If I didn't quit now, this is what the trajectory of my life is going to be. And I was right, well, I definitely am not doing that. I want that. This is not, it's not what I wanted, and it's just something I fell into mostly because no one else would do it. And then I had a kind of a talent around it that I was able to do sound well. So I said, what was it? What was I into? What did I enjoy doing? What was the original kind of spark? So I started thinking, oh, well, I really like doing art, until that was ritually killed during school, as, a lot of passions are for people. Yeah. And so I started hadn't not drawn in at all, like, other than maybe doodling when you're on the phone or something like that. I started to draw again. And, it took me a long while to get back to the level I was when I was, a teen, and then a long while to actually get to a level that's, so I was going to say acceptable. That's not what I mean. Proficient is probably the better word.
Cool.
So then I got back into comics. I was doing a kind of did quite well in comics. Got in kind of Irish scene, the independent Irish scene. I could have, some of my comics won a few awards, stuff like that, but not getting anywhere that it would, you could actually turn it into a living, into, my own creative stuff. So I was doing lots of book covers for other people and say advertising artwork, and I was doing game artwork, which is all very interesting and all that. But again, it's kind of similar to being a sound engineer. You know what I mean? In that you're doing the creativity for other people. You're essentially, and it's not quite this, but you're being an art monkey. You've just been told what to do. And it's while that's great for learning technique and getting your chops together and understanding the nature of the business and all of these things, it doesn't satisfy that itch, which is what I've been trying to do since I was born, to manifest these creative ideas coming out of me, or at least be some sort of conduit for these ideas to come out. So again, part two of the disillusionment was I did a comic that I put everything into it, of the whole, really went for it, really, this is going to be the most representative of what I can do, all of those things, and was so proud of it, so happy with it, and released it, and literally no one cared, no one. And so I had been, I suppose, listening too much to the self-help people who were saying, that if you turn up and you do the effort, and you just have to show up with your shiny thing, whatever it is, be that a CD, be that, a song you've written, a comic you've written, and then the universe will just grant you all the treasures. It'll have your back. And then you get to that point and you go, right, universe, here we go. Your turn. And the universe goes, I never promised you anything. That's not what life's like. And you kind of go, all right. So I kind of had to take a whole step back of kind of reapprise what, one, my worldview, and two, my kind of creative thing, because it was like the music thing, and it can be so disillusioned, and there's an awful lot of privilege in it too, that sense of privilege where you think, just because I show up and just because I'm me,
yes,
that I should get, why shouldn't I be the rock star? Why shouldn't I be the next Alan Moore, or whatever it is that goes through your head at the time? And when you realize, all right, that's not it, you kind of get a better appreciation of what art is, or music is, whatever, and it's a very subjective thing, and you're owed nothing out of it, and other than you have this burning need to, in some way, express yourself through these kind of different mediums. And that's the only promise you have, is that you get to do that. That's it. You get to make your own art. You can, if you can find the time, if you can work your life around making the art, or recording your song, or singing your song, or whatever it is, playing your piano, dancing your dance, that's the promise you get. There is an opportunity for that. Everything else after that, fame, fortune, money, turning it into a job, that's not something that is in any way guaranteed, and it's only kind of a very, I suppose, select few who ever really do get that far. And it's interesting, once you let that go, at least for me, you kind of see, well, what I actually wanted wasn't, I didn't want to be, the rock star. I wanted to be able to just continue doing what I was doing. In a sense, when I was doing the comic, I just wanted to be able to make more comics, and part of that involves, having the means to be able to do that. So a kind of success allows you to make more stuff. Like if you record a good first album, you get to do a second album, but all the stuff that goes with, like, say you're suddenly hurled into, the huge fame, you're famous all of a sudden overnight, like some, like when you hear the stories of, say, like Blur or the Beatles, or, pick any band who are suddenly, working huge, and you go, well, like, how would you deal with that? And as you get older, particularly when I was like my mid-30s, whatever, was going, I would not have dealt with fame well at all, and you kind of look at these, rock stars, the 27-year-olds, and you go, well, like, I'm not saying it would have been quite that, but I mean, I can understand how that kind of happens,
yes.
That you're this, what you thought you were getting out of the deal, out of the pact with the devil, isn't in fact what you were getting. It's like you wanted to be the musician, but you get to be the famous person, and that seems to be no fun for most people who get there. So after the kind of comic thing, I just says, right, I need to stop that, because I'm just following a pattern of doing something, expecting reward, and when I don't get the reward, becoming devastated and depressed, and what's the point of all these things? Because I better rethink my approach to this, because this isn't good. And that got quite dark, in fairness. Like, I can kind of laugh now, but you can understand, when your worldview crumbles, as it must every now and again, to create the new, it comes with, obviously some turmoil, or else it wouldn't be, worth going through. It would be just destruction for the sake of destruction. So then, because I'd always kind of been interested, as like, in occult and magic stuff, that kind of I got waylaid in the self-help area, and I kind of all got caught up in all that new age stuff, which is promises more than it ever can deliver, and probably sets people. The new age thing is kind of like, if your life isn't the way it is, the way you want it to be, then one, you're not working hard enough. So there's that Protestant work ethic thing, or it's your fault. There's something you're doing wrong. Like, so if you get sick, it's really your fault. And it's essentially victim blaming, and that's very hard to get round. If you have that kind of a worldview, it's very, because you just kind of think everything's your fault, and there's no kind of, well, society has a part to play in this. Genetics have a part to play in this. my education, or any amount of things. You know, it's the same as like that kind of horrible thing that happens when people get sick. You know, like people are told, oh, you just have to let go, or you have to love more. Or it's because I think people are looking for a reason to blame the person that the bad thing happened to, so that it won't happen to them. You know, it's like if you hear someone, oh, we just came out of the cinema last night and two guys stabbed him, and you go, oh, well, he must have done something. Well, no, we live in a chaotic universe. Sometimes good people just get stabbed outside the cinema because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's not their fault. So at that point, I started getting into, I was going to do, one great thing I did at the time is I deleted all my social media, which, you know, I think is possibly a thing that will be on the cards again sometime soon. I tried to do it at the beginning of this year, but then lockdown happened, and you know, you just kind of, the worldview changed a bit, and goes, oh well, I'll put it off for another while. But it is something that I don't. It gives us a warped view of the world, you know, and of relationships and people. But any sort of business, as you know yourself, if you're any kind of you know, if you're a creative or you're trying to do something, how do you tell people about it now? There's no other way of doing it other than, you know, posting something on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. Like, I wouldn't even know how to tell people about my creative stuff anyway. But at that point, I just said, right, I'm deleting everything and I'm starting again, and just kind of got into groups, set up a new Facebook thing just for groups, you know, just, and not my own name or whatever. And it was all about magic and all about kind of occult stuff and trying to learn through that and come out that way. And then I started doing the blog, which is Adventures in Woo Woo, which was basically, there's an awful lot of bullshit talked in occult and new age and spiritual circles and all that. And there's you know, there's all these promises, and I fell into all these traps around it. So I'm going to talk about my journey through it, warts and all, you know, that's just no trying to pretend that I'm just, you know, grand evil black magician. Oh, I know all the secrets. Just going on. This is my life. This is what I'm doing. And with the idea of that, it's, you know, from a creative point of view, you know, that it's that kind of a creative work through magic. Because as I definitely feel that thing that Alan Moore says, that, you know, art is magic, magic is art. It seems to be the same thing. Just, you know, the canvas is slightly different. One is your life. One is the, you know, the page, and one is the you know, the piece of music, the composition, whatever it is. So the blog started doing well, and people kind of respected, I suppose, the honest approach and the fresh kind of thing of just not trying to bullshit people, not adding to the noise that was there. But it kind of was coming to a kind of a financial kind of situation where it was unsustainable what I was doing, because while I was still doing art the whole time, and I was, you know, doing the book covers, doing the, you know, the sound engineering version of a creative artist, that kind of was drying up a bit. And those things like new VAT laws were introduced in the EU, that, you know, there was all these kind of extra annoyances that was going on. And of course there was the, you know, that whole thing with the economic collapse of the world at one point and all that. So it's just kind of got to the point where it's like, this isn't really sustainable, and I'm going to have to go out and get a real job very soon. And for whatever reason, that kind of pictured in my head as being, I was going to have to go out and sweep the streets. For some reason, that was just, you know, it was either I'm doing my art, doing my creativity, or I have to sweep the streets, because that's my two options. But I genuinely thought that was on its way out. I had my chance, and it just didn't work out. Now get on with it. So it says, I'll do one last final project, and I'll make it the most selfish project I've ever made, just for me, not thinking anyone would care about it. And genuinely, it wasn't like a kind of a last hope of please love me, the universe, or whatever it was. It was just, no, I'm going to do a divination magic card deck that I want to use, so that I'll have this time that I've left before my money runs out, that I can bring with me into my new life. And you know, that at least I'll have this to show for it. And that turned out to be the 47th, which is the deck. And I genuinely felt that I would release it, maybe 10, 20 people would go, oh, that's cool. And then 2 weeks later, that was it. That was, you know, that was, because that was kind of how any of my other artistic endeavors had kind of worked out. You know, when you write the song, you record it, you get the CD back in the day, and you know, you release it, and then, you know, your friends go grand, and then a week later no one cares, you know, like all this efforts. So that's what I was kind of assuming. But of course it didn't. Very quickly people really picked up on it and enjoyed it and started using it. And you know, there was that kind of point of where it, you know, the tides in a sense, I suppose, turned, and it was like, I think this kind of became sustainable. And then that led to podcasts and YouTubes and all of that kind of the different things that I do now. And then, interestingly enough, during the lockdown, there's just this kind of surge in me, or this kind of burning need in me to get back into music happened. So it was like the completion of a circle too, where it goes like you don't have to throw out. You don't have to just be a person who does comics. You can be, and that was one of the big kind of things that I learned from ignoring the new age people, is that you don't have to have a definite plan, and you don't have to define yourself in some sort of way, and you don't have to have this business thing of, find your niche, find your thing. What I discovered is that possibly I could be the niche, and that involves that I can do podcasts, I can do blogs, I can, draw, I can write music, and you can do all these things and express myself, rather than trying to in some way limit yourself to one thing, because that's all we're allowed, it seems. That what are you? You're meant to have one answer to that. I'm a doctor. It's not. Right. I'm a singing doctor who also, I don't know, dances at the weekend or something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that kind of brings me up to date, I suppose.
Brilliant. The reason, you see, obviously, it is a trick question. That first question of mine, because as you say, it's like it's presenting that sort of viewpoint that we think we're only one thing. And certain creative people will respond to that in a way that says, well, I'm not.
Yeah.
Where you catch me, what period of time in my life. And there are so many points here that, in your story, because obviously the creative people, obviously I see a lot of musicians. I've taught a lot of people to play guitar and form bands and stuff in the time that I've been around. And you get the situation where it's the hair's breadth thing of the deal's on the table, the break's there, you can see it there, and it suddenly disappears.
Yeah.
Sort of very, very tempting and frustrating. People think they've got the break coming. And that seems to be quite common. So when you're talking about the new age thing, of the, follow your bliss type of.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say this on your show about, actually, Campbell's thing was probably follow the blisters.
Yeah, so seemingly that's what he ended up saying, that he wish he had said that.
Yes.
And again, that kind of works. That's kind of pointing though that you need to work harder too. There's kind of that, which is not necessarily, which is true. Like, I mean, you have to. You're not just going to be given anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you work harder than everyone else that you're going to get the thing either. It's so follow your bliss, follow your blisters, and all that. Both the good advice in certain situations, but not as an overall kind of guarantee. Because I think the problem is, and it's the thing you're kind of, I think, alluding to there, is that there's this kind of, the deal's on the table, or we're heading to deal. And that's how we start defining ourselves, through this success, through this kind of, I'm not a guitar player unless someone else tells me I am, unless the guy in the suit, gives me the money and says, well, no, you're a guitar player, you're a professional guitar player, or, someone in some way allows us to be it. And when you start getting to the point where the deal is nearly on the table, or you're striving towards that, and then eventually you realize that that's probably not going to happen, you realize the emptiness that is in needing the validation of who you are to come from an external type of thing. Which is the lesson, I suppose, that it took me a long while to learn, in that you're an artist, you're a creative because you are, not because someone allows you to be, or because someone lets you be, or, or because you're successful at it, or, you're better than other people at it, or anything. It's none of those things are what you're actually looking for, but because what you're actually looking for is expressing yourself, or in some way, to be a bit more kind of woo-woo about it, is to bring something from eternity into this place, which is, bounded by time, or whatever way you want to kind of delineate the, super consciousness, or, the collective consciousness, or Alan Moore's idea space, or plenty of people have talked about this kind of, like in almost like an astral plane, wherever ideas come from, wherever they are now, that suddenly become in my, threw me into whatever I'm doing. And we know this is to be true because we know so many kind of stories of people getting the same idea at the same time. As if
Yes.
it's, the Jung's thing of ideas of people, not people
Yes.
have ideas, which,
Yeah.
so it's, like, I think it's apocryphal, that idea of, nylon were in New York and London, they both found it at the same time, or discovered it, but I don't think it's actually true. But it's a good example of what that kind of means, of the idea arriving. Because you also know that when you have an idea and you don't kind of capitalize on it, that someone else is going to have it very, that everyone's had a great idea for a movie that they never did anything. And then 3 years later, oh, that's the movie. I had the idea. So the idea just went, yeah, you're not doing anything. Next person, please.
Yes. So there's a few things here. You see, what you're saying has come up so often in my conversations with other creative people, that you're just a conduit or a doorway to
Sure,
ideas.
yeah.
Your ideas have you. Songs already exist. They appear through you. Okay, they're coloured by, you're part of the alchemy, if you like.
Yeah.
But they're there, And I think this is an important point, because we have commoditized, and we certainly commoditized music.
Sure.
It's my song. I wrote this song, and I'm going to sell my song to blah. And you look at, and so it goes on with any other thing. I'm sure it's true with people writing novels and comics, and
I'm sure it's everything. We've
it is.
commoditized everything at this point.
And what I started to question is what happened before we did that. What was art? And of course, you're then looking at something where it was an interface with something else. It was the way of people communicating with the world that you couldn't make logical. It was the way that hunter-gatherers communicated with whatever. It's that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that sort of makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring up a person I know that you found very interesting back in the day. I knew Stuart Wilde.
Oh, okay, right.
And I recorded a song with Stuart, which was an interesting experience.
Right, right.
But we spent a little bit of time. I didn't know him. I knew him well enough to, I think of him as a friend, but
yeah,
like a lot of these people, he's complicated.
Sure, for sure.
And there were some people who knew Stuart very well, and I couldn't say I knew him very well, but what was interesting about him, he was incredibly creative, astonishingly creative, and you obviously could pick that up from reading the books. But this guy was one of the funniest guys I'd ever met.
Yeah, genuinely funny. Yeah.
Incredible. So I don't know, did you ever meet him, or did you?
I did. I met him once in Glastonbury. After, yeah, of all places. I just happened to, like, it was one of those kind of moments where, it just things all align up. I was there, the Goddess Festival that happens in Glastonbury. Yeah. At the time, I was going out with a girl who was, I suppose, a neo-pagan or some sort of witch, whatever, and she wanted to go over to this, and so we were over for that. And then when I arrived, Stuart Wilde's going to be here tomorrow night. That's why I'm here then, obviously. And he was just doing a kind of a talk down in the town hall as it is there. And so I went down looking for tickets, and obviously it was sold out. But the guy had said, if you just arrive, you'll be put on the waiting list, and hope for the best. But I did get in anyway on his talk, and he came out drunk as he did around this period, and he did the people just weren't into him at all. He ended up getting not quite booed off the stage. He didn't care, obviously, but he was. But afterwards, when everyone was, leaving in disgust, there was about 5 or 6 people who kind of, stood up and gravitated towards him, and I was one of them. And he just says, "No, right, we'll meet at the pub across the road or whatever." So we got to spend a couple of hours with him, and then when we got thrown out of the pub, we just sat at the square, and he gave everyone a reading of who to wear, and made sure. And like yourself, if you've known me, he didn't mince his words, or he wouldn't say things to make you feel good about yourself. Like he told, he's just shooting straight, that kind of thing. But he's. I've never met anyone in my life who had that particular energy that he has, and it's the type of energy that you expect. Like when you think of the kind of mystic Indian or Tibetan guru up the mountain or something, it's like that. Only there was a swagger to it. It
Yes.
wasn't necessarily a holiness to it. It's very odd to explain.
Yeah.
But
he was a bit like the guru dressed as a fool.
Yeah, the trickster type. There's definitely that
He
kind
was
of
a
trickster
trickster.
type thing. Yeah,
He
but he
was-
did, I suppose. It was around that period, I suppose. From then on, he went from being this jolly chappy, ha ha ha, kind of Stuart Wilde, into a very kind of serious, darkness, I suppose, thing. And that he kind of, the thing he warned about in his early books is that, sort of seriousness and people becoming very serious. He seems to, in the end of, in some sense, fallen for that too. At least from the outside, you knew him, so you might have a better appreciation. But his books got very dark, and he got very like almost in bits. I think it is in one of them where he's talking about demons going up your ass and all this stuff. It's getting very. I don't know. Maybe he's watching too much David Icke or something. I know someone said he started taking an awful lot of drugs and he was drinking and stuff. And who am I to say? But I don't know.
I can fill you in a little bit. I think,
okay.
From what I know, I mean, Stuart knew lots of people. Obviously, he knew David Icke, but he also knew people like Graham Hancock,
right,
and Rupert Sheldrake, and it was a case. Oh, and he was, obviously back in the day, he was friends with Deepak Chopra and all sorts of people. Right?
Yeah, and Wayne Dyer.
Wayne Dyer. Oh, yeah, Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
I don't. I think I'm not sure. It could have been Wayne Dyer, but one of them he didn't like particularly because. Anyway, I won't go there.
Yeah.
let's leave it like that. Leave it part. Yeah. But when you sort of met him, he was like, as you say, like at the dog and duck, as he used to say. Which is what you experienced. I mean, he was like the raconteur par excellence.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I'm not kidding. He could literally. Well, we went and saw. Where did we see him? Because obviously he used to travel around, he used to live in hotels, basically. And we went to, I think we were in Browns in London, it was either there or some other exotic location. But he'd been writing. No, we were in Bath at the Crescent Hotel in Bath.
Right.
He invited us down. It was me and my wife and some other people that were there, And he'd been writing a script for a film that was going to star this German comedian. I know that sounds like a sort of an oxymoron, but the guy was actually Turkish, but he was German.
Right. Yeah.
It was a big name over there. Kai, I think his name was. Anyway, that's beside the point. But the idea was this guy was going to star in it, and it was a bit like sort of 40 Towers meets a skiing adventure.
All right, okay.
And you read this chapter, and I'm not kidding. It was those sort of moments where you couldn't breathe.
Right. Oh, right. Really, yeah.
I mean, it was just unbelievably funny. But that's what he was like. He could, he could have been a stand-up comedian.
Oh, for sure, definitely, yeah. You said you recorded with him, but was this around the Cecilia stuff, or was it a separate thing, or?
No. He did a lot of recording work. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard Heartland, which was a CD that he did with Tim Wheater.
No, I haven't.
That's brilliant. And he did another one to do with the sort of Irish, myths and stuff like that, which was
right.
Which name escapes me at the moment. But this was after that. He was doing some sort of like incidental music and stuff with people. But he was
always kind of doing music with, I suppose, the Subliminum tapes and things that he had.
Yeah, he used to do a lot of that sort of stuff and sort of like metronome, alpha states.
Yeah.
And he was brilliant at that.
He was
doing the most amazing stuff, which I trained in a lot of NLP, and I could look at that and go, oh yeah. And again, he knew Richard Bandler.
Right. Well, there you go.
So I mean, you talk about him being so sort of well connected. It was pretty amazing, really. But
It's so strange about Stuart Wilde because he was like such big news. Like he was
yes,
like the darling of the new age scene until he really wasn't. And no one knows who he is now. Like
no,
he was like, I don't know, as big as any of them, you know, at one, but particularly around, I suppose, the Quickening, or you know, the
yes,
Force, that kind of, or Miracles, I suppose, is
yeah.
the equivalent. He was the guy who was doing the Secret long before the Secret. I know it's obviously not his thing, you know, but I don't understand how he got kind of, I suppose, whitewashed from
I don't,
existence.
I don't know, but I mean, he had quite a sort of a niche near the end. I mean, there were a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
involved with what he was doing, but he just wasn't as big, you
no,
know. But I don't actually think it bothered him too much.
okay, that's good.
Because
I'm
he
glad
did
to hear that.
actually say to me, he was talking about writing books. He said there was one time he said I could, you know, I could write a book and I could sell 50,000 copies in the first week.
Right.
Bang, like that. And he was saying, but that doesn't happen anymore because there's not the there's not the demand for it.
Yeah,
The interesting thing is what I was sort of saying about the Stuart Wilde stuff is I think that he was very good at being able to spot things and advise people because he used to advise a lot of big name people,
okay,
right, including members of the royal family.
right, okay.
One in particular, which I'll just leave there.
Okay, no worries.
But I mean, you know, he was consulted by a lot of rich people, and
Yeah,
that's where he, you know, managed to maintain his sort of lifestyle. I think I'm only just, you know, I'm only sort of picking bits and pieces out from what I gleaned from him. But he, you know, I think when you look at people like that and you see how creative they are, and they're coming at it from a different perspective, and this brings me back to something else that you were saying about how you got to that point where it was like, I might as well just do this thing, right?
yeah, yeah.
And it's almost like you're not trying anymore. You're
That's
just
it.
doing the
Yeah,
thing. And that's where I first picked up on you was the 40 Servants, because it came
right.
as an email and it was this thing, or it's something on Facebook or something. And it was that sort of montage thing of all the pictures that suddenly came
Oh
up.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it was
yeah. The
like,
gifting.
oh my God, this is amazing. What's this? Right. And then you sort of dropped off my radar until much later when I actually,
Okay.
you know, I sort of got the cards. But that made such an impact, and it's almost like it came left field.
Yeah, no, it definitely came left field for me. I'll
Yeah,
tell you that. But that kind of, I suppose, confluence, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, of events where I, you know, got into the woo-way state, and you know, I got to the point where I suppose, peak helplessness, to borrow a phrase from Alan Chapman,
oh, right, okay,
where you,
yeah, okay,
yeah, to the point where you're not creating a strategy to try and fix what you think is broken. You've just given up, but not in the um, not in the burn everything down giving up, which is how we usually give up. In that, you know, it's like uh, I want to leave the band, and I want the band to fall apart, and I want the music industry to, you know, to be
yeah,
destroyed. You know, it's not that. It was like, I'm going to leave the band because I'm leaving the band, and I hope to do well.
yeah,
And you know, I that it's this isn't working out for me. It's not working out for them. It's not working out for everyone. Time to move on. Sadness, obviously, you know, a loss, but an acceptance in the. But it's more than that, because an acceptance is I suppose, again, that's a strategy. You know, it's the woo woo thing. It's the non. You know, it's the not that thing. You
yes,
know, it's whatever you want to point at. It's not that. So that kind of place where I was in, where, like I said, doing the most selfish piece of art I've ever done in my life, allowed me not to try and cater to other people's wants or beliefs, or, you know, to try to make it acceptable for people, or have in my mind that, oh, I'll make this card because that would make me, you know, that people in a certain circle would like that, you know, or, you know, my mum would really like that, or, you know, Stuart Wilde would really like that, or, you know, so not trying to make a nod or a wink to anyone. And it was also at that point, I wanted to incorporate every single bit of my life up to that point into it. So there's lots of art in the 47s from different comics I did. You know, there's kind of lots of left things pointing to music and creativity and lots of me in it. Like it's definitely me, you know, but also it's not, because we're coming back to this kind of idea of being the conduit. And I use the word conduit more than channeled, because it's very easy to put people astray by saying it's a channeled work, because it's like, you know, you have this idea of, you know, IWAS behind you going, yes, now draw the sun. You know, it's not that. It's definitely, it's not Abraham Hicks' voice where you start making, you know, stupid voice coming through you where you know your intonation change or whatever. That kind of, it's not that.
Monk or whatever.
Yeah, or, you know, or something ludicrously racist or something that it used to be, like, you know, some really caricature of a Chinese man or something, something very, very, very bad. But it's conduit, I think, is a better word, in that you're the thing where this comes true. And the more you kind of get out of the way of it, the better it is. The less, you know, the more you try to make, and I particularly found this with writing characters in comics, the more you try to tell them what they are, the less they have an ability to work in the story. And the more you kind of get out of the way and see who they are, the better it seems to be. So while there was an element of putting all my stuff into the 47s and wanting to incorporate different things and making it something that I, you know, it's aesthetically pleasing to me, I would be, you know, utilitarian for me. It's all, you know, again, as I said, selfish act. There was this element of, how do I say this without it not being what I was going to say, of something else at play. That's probably the best. And I was aware of that. But I've also been aware of that doing a guitar solo on stage that, you know, doesn't lead to anything else other than a really nice experience, you know. So it's a state, I suppose, that I've been aware of, that mostly happens around music, because I think it's easier to although not, I was going to say it's easier to kind of get into state of music. It is, because you've that hyper sense of, you know, and it's almost when you're on stage and you're in the flow, whatever, it's almost like a contraction in that things get very close, but you also are the most expansive you've ever been in your life. It's very hard. It's only other musicians know what that is.
Yes,
like,
totally.
You can't explain that. Yeah. So all of that was kind of sort of the kind of all of that coming together with the 47s. Then when they were done, because I had, say, done the comics, you know, worked in the industry, all that kind of thing, I knew how to present it in a way, you know. So I knew that gif of the, you know, the flashy thing that you pick the card and all that, you know, I knew that would work on Facebook, you know. That was just so there was, you know, even elements of that, you know, I had the kind of mundane, had the like businessy sense of it or whatever. I knew that would kind of catch people's eye. I didn't think it would catch people's eye as like I don't know, those like millions of shares or something like that. Like,
really? Oh my
those
God,
ridiculous. Yeah, like absolutely just got ridiculous. Now that doesn't translate into a million deck souls, I'll tell you, by any means. But it's and the thing, I suppose, of the fact of I don't know how aware people are of what a servitor is. So I'll just quickly explain that. It's an idea or a thought form or an encapsulation of some sort of energy or way of thinking. Is how I would describe a servitor. And so each of the cards in the deck is also a servitor. So when you have a kind of a thing where you're kind of releasing them into the world or whatever, you have to there's a kind of traditionally said that you have to feed, they have to have something that to sustain themselves. So I said, but the best thing to do to sustain a servitor would be for it to feed on attention and use. Because, you know, that's what a deck is designed to be doing. So every time someone uses it, or every time someone looks at it, or every time, you know, a picture appears on Facebook that, you know, goes to, and that is that's good magic, but it's also, that's, you know, that's good advertising, that's good publicity, that's good business sense or whatever. Rather than most people like kind of say, like, will feed servitors and things like, oh, the sweat from their exercise, or, you know, some sort of energy or whatever. But you have to go do that, in a sense, you know, that's something, and it's not something you can necessarily boost, or you can, you know, like, if I need big magic, I have to do, you know, 60 squats instead of 30 squats or whatever, you know. But at least when you have something that is kind of natural to it, it seems the most natural thing that I wouldn't know why anyone would make a servitor now or create a servitor that wouldn't be fed on, you know, use and attention. It just seems the most ideal thing for it. So that all of those kind of things came together into a nice little package. But to kind of emphasize the point, if I didn't think anyone would care, is that the PDF, the original, very original PDF that explained the cards, I wrote in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Just go, oh, well, I better do something for the people who, the 10, 20 people who are going to read it. And it's like, it was awful. Like, it was terrible. It was full of spelling mistakes, full of like rush thoughts, like really, really the most unprofessional thing you would have. But it's just to get something out. So then once people started getting interested in it, I had to go back and rewrite the whole thing and, kind of go, well, I better take this a bit more seriously than I was.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, because there's so many things that within that sort of confirms things that I've experienced about, creation of music and songs that somebody's written in 20 minutes and becomes like the biggest thing.
Yeah.
That's stories about things like Hey Big Spender, that was written in about 15 minutes.
Right. Okay. Or Yesterday in a Dream.
Yeah, and that started, and because that's got that sort of classic thing that, it was ham and eggs or whatever it was, or scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs, yeah, scrambled eggs. How I love my ham and eggs. Or
yeah, that's right. And you sort of look at that. The other classic one was, Wild Thing, a little bit of time at the end of a recording session, and you think, so there's something in that business of not trying, throwing it out there and see what happens type of idea, and there must be loads of examples of that.
For sure. Like, many times have you heard that, well, this was meant to be the B-side, and then turned out to be the A.
I spoke to Gordon Giltrap, the guitarist, about this, because obviously he's goes back quite some time in his career, and talking about the songs that the artist didn't like that became their most important song. And there's just reams of them, and
but there's a kind of, I suppose, a downfall in that you can end up feeling that you're not represented in your career, in a sense. I know Garth Brooks, I thought, like, he's famously said that the two, whatever, I think was it The Dance and Friends in No Places, they're his two big songs. He hated both of them, didn't want to record either of them. And when he did, and they took off, he says he doesn't have a career. But I often wondered, like, does he still not like them? Like, does he kind of?
I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, like, is it just that he see it as a stepping stone, and now this is the cost of doing business? Because it would be horrible, wouldn't it, though? Like, it must be like one of those things that when you have, like, say, even a one-hit wonder, and so many metal bands, this has happened to, where it's, that one ballad, that's more than so extreme, that kind of defines their career. And go, well, it's not who they are at all, but they don't have a career without that song too. So
I know, that's peculiar, isn't it? Because that song is completely like 180 degrees away from what the rest of the extreme material is.
Sure, yeah. But at the same time, it's it's Nuno all over too. Like, there's no one else playing that song. Because of, you can kind of see it in them. But any of these things, like, there's probably there's a million stories around this, and there's, like, I wonder, does it happen quite so much in art or creativity that takes longer? Because, you can write a song in 15 minutes, but you can't write a book in 15 minutes. So there's less chance of you, doing a throwaway, 400-page novel or something. Although I suppose you could encapsulate an entire story arc with it very quickly or something. Yeah. And I'm sure dance, that must happen. The flow of dance, where people just, come up with things like did Michael Jackson sit down and, really work out that he's going to do the moonwalk, or did it just suddenly appear? You can only imagine that these things, I suppose, maybe you want to think these things, appear like that. Maybe it was a very methodical, thought out thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I know a few things about Michael Jackson, because one of the bands I was in years ago, right near the beginning, I was the lead singer was Roger Moore's son.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that was one of those things you thought, you'd arrived, really.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm a shoe in here. Yeah, this is it.
I got a chance to meet Roger Moore and a few other people, but Jeff was like friends with. Well, one of the family friends was Quincy Jones.
All right. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Now, I didn't meet Quincy Jones, but it was like there's this other world out there, with
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
the famous. So
The other
then
side of the door. Yeah.
having a conversation, and you just sort of stop for a minute because they've said something that you can't grasp. And one
Yeah.
of
That
them,
was just normal to them. Yeah.
one of them was Jeffrey's mother. Turned around came to see us sort of do this, whatever it was, we were playing or something. Anyway. She came up to me afterwards and she said, "Oh, thank you. Everything that you're doing for Jeffrey." It's like, okay, I was not quite sure what that meant. And she said, "Yeah, and Quincy's really interested in what Jeffrey's doing."
All right.
So the next time you're in America, you should pop in and see Quincy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll do that. Yeah.
And
I'll
I
do
said,
that.
I'll do that.
Oh man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so but yes, that's just like another world. So I think maybe talking about Michael Jackson, I don't know, it might have been something that just happened on one of the weird events that happened in his life where he started realizing he was walking backwards while he was walking forwards. I think it's quite possible, because he was an odd fish, I think.
Indeed, yeah. But I think it's probably good to stress that, with regard to this, that getting to that state and getting to that flow state involves an awful lot of work. It involves a proficiency on your chosen medium. To be able to be that conduit for things. Like, there's no point in saying that, oh, I'm just going to feel it and not even know the key of the song you're in, or what I mean. It's you can, I suppose, but in that, if you don't know how to solo, how to do a guitar solo, if you've never done one before, you're not going to ever channel that, unless some sort of weird possession type event happens. But so it's kind of, I remember someone from Queen, possibly Freddie Mercury, said that their kind of whole goal was to be ready for if and when luck struck.
Exactly.
So that when if that opportunity did happen, that they were ready for it. I think that's a good kind of approach to art in general, to be ready for it. So I often find when I'm not feeling too, when I don't have a new story, or I don't have something to work on, or rather than kind of feeling like it's some sort of writer's block or something like that, I'll go and learn something new. It's some new technique, or I'll work on some figure drawing or anatomy, or just kind of try to up my technical game a bit, so that when the next wave from idea space comes, I'm a better conduit. I'm a better able to translate whatever it is into it. And that's the same, I suppose, if you're going through the whole thing of songwriting or stuff like that, and you're coming out with cliches, or every third song is that's a Beatles song, what am I doing? Go and maybe learn some jazz chords or whatever. If you're into jazz, go and learn some blues.
See, that's because we were talking about the sort of songwriting thing before we started recording that I'm doing with the kids, and obviously I used Burroughs' sort of cut up thing, because obviously Burroughs was the most important man in pop music that nobody knew about, if you sort of
sure.
Inspired so many people, and he lived so long, considering he had a
interesting life.
And
but I suppose that Bowie popularized the idea, I suppose, really. So people think it's kind of his idea, I suppose.
Yeah, but of course Lennon was using the ideas.
Right. Okay. Right.
I mean, and some of the.
Of course he was.
Some of the Beatles ideas are pure cut up. Whether I mean, Sgt. Pepper's album for a start.
Yeah, even down to Benefit of Mr. Kite actually has a cut up section of music in the Carnival section.
Also, A Day in the Life. Because A Day in the Life is sort of three songs. It's his song, Paul McCartney's song, and obviously George Martin's bit of orchestral bit of
thing,
stuff together, and the song starts with John Lennon telling you how he wrote the song. I read the newspaper, and then it goes about all the things that were in the newspaper. So I mean, that's sort of like laying it out there, and I think. What you're saying about going back to what you're saying about having a new skill, bring those. That is it's sort of an NLP thing about learning something new, because it's not necessarily the new thing, but it's sort of almost like it creates ripples, and that's one of the things that I sort of encourage people to understand, that you can do something, and it's a bit like looking through the attic. It's not the first thing you find that you pick up.
Yes,
it's the thing that's underneath that bit.
Sure, yeah.
And your mind is like that. And sometimes it needs something else to like create these sort of ripple effects.
It's kind of like when you come up against, they would say, oh, I've kind of come up against the wall or something like that. It's like, you're not going to get out of that in a sense by doing more of what you're already doing. You need to do something. You need a new idea, and that idea isn't going to appear in this kind of stagnant pond of your current ideas. So like say you're all you ever use to draw is a pencil or whatever. So then, you get to a stage, I just can't get to the next stage. You possibly might need, to spend a week painting. And then what you learn from that, you're probably not going to use, the technique of it in the penciling, but something will switch in your brain. It will open up a new avenue where you can then go, all right, so this is, now I can see that you would never have got to from just using a pencil, And I think that's a thing that happens, and I'm sure you know this from teaching guitar and stuff, is that if you're only into rock music, you're very limiting yourself by only learning rock licks. You know what I mean? And that it's by expanding your vocabulary or your musicianship or whatever, makes you a better rock musician. You know what I mean? You can learn some classical stuff, not because you want to be a classical guitar player, but because it will afford you better ideas to approach to, your own style. So I suppose it's just that's that thing we're saying, more ripples. It's not the actual thing that you learned. It's not the technique that you're going to think. It's the ripple, that allows. Yeah,
it is the ripple effect, and also then you start. And this is something that you said a lot earlier, which I wanted to sort of pick up on. That these things often come, the opportunities come at you unexpected, from a place that you didn't think they were going to come. You wouldn't have expected them to come from there.
Yeah.
The chance meeting with somebody in the street.
Yeah.
Doesn't live in that town, that says to you, there's a band that's looking for, I was thinking about you, this band we're looking for blah, or whatever. That type of thing. And there's so many examples of this when you talk to people about those moments where something really happens and you never saw them coming.
No, and you can't. It's like, suppose it's Nassim Taleb or whatever that name is, right? He talks about the black swan. You can't predict the black swan, and it's the thing that changes everything, but it's only in hindsight. And this is the thing where you can look back and go, oh yeah, I met your man, he got me involved with that band. That seems, that's right and that thing. But it's only, you could never have predicted it. And it's only in hindsight that it seems normalized. Well, that's a thing that happened. And that's a thing that I think happens in magic an awful lot, and it is that you do the magic for something and then it happens and then your brain goes, but it only happened because of this. And you go, no, it happened because I did magic for it. And there's kind of the warning, I suppose, is that if you do magic for something and you get it and you don't acknowledge it as magic, you lose the magic. And that's, I don't think, means that, that thing that you got by magic is taken away. You actually lose the magic element of it. Your brain just wants to normalize it, wants to and say, no, there's no such thing as magic. Yeah.
Because again, it's that thing that in cultures that have magical thinking, more magic happens.
Sure, for sure.
I always sort of look at this from the point of view of, like, you decide that you want to buy a particular type of car in a particular color, and the next time you go out, you start seeing that car.
Yeah.
It's that type of thing. There's something goes on in the way that your consciousness works that either brings things to it or makes you observant of things. And that's why I think, being creative is important, not just because people need to draw more or whatever, but it's because it's an important function of our thinking that we've sort of lost. Because like you're saying about your example of your education in art, that you weren't encouraged in a way that would have given you your own motivation and what have you to travel in a particular direction. And that was obviously true of art in my time. I had a good art teacher, but I had a couple that were terrible. Right. But it was really true with music. When I first started teaching guitar, the guitar wasn't a proper instrument. I was told that a number of times,
Right.
But when they started to realise that I actually knew more about music generally than they did, once you got them out of their classical thing,
Sure.
and then you started talking about jazz and all the rest of it, they had no idea, or world music.
Yeah. I suppose the conservatism of
Oh, it's
music,
incredible.
particularly classical music. Yeah. But I
Incredible.
suppose the thing about education, though, and I mean that kind of then unfolds into like classical music and art and all that, is that our education system, for the most part, is designed to create factory workers.
Yes.
It's to give you kind of a general overview of the world, enough so that you don't know enough that you'd question anything, but you'll be happy to sit down and do your manual job for 40 years, and then have your pension 2 years later. If you're lucky, you die. And that was probably a good education to have in 1920, but we don't live in this world anymore,
Right.
and it definitely does not allow for the nourishment, to use that word again, of any sort of creative spirit, because it's actively dampened, and it's you're told not to, for many reasons, because a creative life isn't, oh well, you're not going to make any money, there's no way out of, it's not guaranteed, all of the stuff that we would have been told. Same about art, or similar, like the art that I was tried to push me in was, get into graphic design, like design labels for very liquid bottles. Goes, I would rather die, thanks very much, but for me, but someone else, I know people who love that stuff, and that kind of thing. But the good thing, in one sense, now, I suppose, is that no one's guaranteed anything anymore. So you go to school and go, I'd want to be an accountant. Well, you may or may not be accountant. Who knows? There's nothing guaranteed. So you may as well try to be a rock star, because it's as likely to lead you
Yes.
to a job. But I think the emphasis on fulfillment could be brought up a wee bit in school, on, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
What are you good at? Because you end up with people being in careers that they just hate, or they're not suited
Yeah.
for, or worse, they are suited for, but, it's just, not their way. It's like me in sound engineering. I was a particularly good sound engineer, but like, so what? I'm probably a particularly good window cleaner. It doesn't mean I should do
Right.
these jobs, and you can get kind of fooled by success, in that you think that, well, because I'm successful at something, then that's my calling, or this is my true will, or something. And which is equally, just to bring back to the point of these kind of special synchronicities, where you meet the person
Yeah.
and they go, oh, you should join this band. That can happen. And if you get a bad feeling about it, and it's not just nerves, it's not just you being afraid of, stepping up or doing something, you are under no compulsion, or law, to follow any of these things. You
No.
do, and it's not as if that you'll be punished for it, or there'll be some sort of oh well, you had your chance. You have to have your own discernment around these things, and your own feelings and your own gut, but being aware that sometimes these things will challenge you, and that's not the same as having a bad feeling about it. You should be able to tell the difference. Sometimes it's hard, depending on how much shadow work you need to do in a particular area, whatever. And it can sometimes, anxiety can feel like, oh, I got the bad buzz. And you go, no, you're just anxious, and that. But it's the same in magic, in that if you, for whatever reason, call up the demons of hell and say, I need a new job, and then they go, here's an accountant's job, you can go, well, I don't want that job. You're not bound to be, to think, just
No.
because the universe has presented you with something, because it's that can lead you down a road again of, not like, you could equally make a point of go, well, maybe my art teacher was right, and I should have designed very liquid bottles, because who am I to know what my life is? And that could have led into a much happier life, or whatever. But I don't think so. It
No.
just, it felt wrong, rather than I was scared to do it. Or I just go, no, that's not a fit for me.
No. I just think
Again, that comes from the kind of new age stuff, I think, as well, where
it does.
you kind of,
It does.
you kind of have to feel your way through life, and say yes to everything. I did a period of saying yes to everything, and what I found was the main thing is that I got an awful lot more things that I didn't want to do. It
Yeah.
increased the level, rather than people, oh, you say yes, you don't know where it goes. It goes, well, I do now know where it goes. It leads to an awful lot of things that I don't want. So
Well,
don't feel you have to say yes.
it's like having lots and lots of TV channels with nothing worth watching on any of them.
Yeah, or what do we all do? We'll put on Netflix and spend
We've
most of our
ended
time
up
looking
with
for
that.
something to watch.
Exactly. We've ended up with that.
Yeah.
So, and just one point about the thing about school. I think one of the interesting things is that the school is based around the idea of a factory. If you think about it, it's like we get a load in one place, and then we organise it in a particular way, and it's all and you know, year 7 you're going to do this, and year 8 you're going to do that, and so on. It's like a production line, and I think that is contextual.
Okay.
The context that you're in, because that's how hypnosis works, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
It's about context, you know.
So you're framing, you're kind of trying to frame people's entire lives by starting them off in a box.
Exactly. You frame people's way of thinking about stuff by putting, you know, all the information that you want to get into people's unconscious is in the context, not in the detail.
Yes. So it doesn't seem abnormal to spend 40 years of your life in a factory, because, you know, that's normal. Look, that's how we started. Look.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Because then when you kind of put that a bit wider, you go, well, what things are going on that we have no idea, because it just seems normal, you know? Yes. I've often asked Spud on the podcast, because if an alien came down now and looked at us, there's bound to be at least 5 things that are ludicrously mental that we do, that we just think, oh, that's just normal. Money is definitely one of them. I mean, that has to be one of them. The other ones, I suppose, religion and stuff like that is a bit obvious, but I don't think that's what it would be. It'll be something societally, some sort of cultural thing that we have, some sort of cultural belief that is just insane, that it's so crazy that we can't see it, but we just all accept it as normal.
And you've only got to look back in the near past to go, we actually thought that. And there were actually laws that said that, you know. We're only talking a few years that we could look at something.
Yeah, and it's that thing of, like, you know, when you look back at people and you go, like, I know, like Lovecraft, and you go, oh, he's, you know, very racist, and always a man of his time and all that, and we can judge it from our more morally higher standards now, you know, and rightly so, these type of things. But I mean, don't kid ourselves. We're doing something equally worse that we can't see, you know.
Exactly. That's the thing.
That, so, you know, 100 years time to look back at us and go, Jesus, Tommie was very whatever he was. That, like, me thinking I'm great now, you know.
Yeah, we were doing, you know, we were living the light, or whatever it is. Passing the light. You think,
yeah.
So what's your? I know you've got a comic. Is that how you would term it? Or graphic?
Yeah. I'm not a fan of graphic novel, because the comics, you know, stop trying to polite them up for your, you know, for your auntie. You know, it's like, stop trying to pretend they're, you know, some sort of, I don't know. It's the graphic novel kind of claim, when I understand why it happened, but it's kind of like, oh, comics for children, so we can't take them seriously, so we'll make up this kind of
other words.
Stupid term, graphic novel. Like, you know, why don't you just call it a picture book? You know, it's just like, no. But I call it graphic novel if you want, but it's definitely, I would call them comics. So.
Yeah. So you've got one that's just come out.
Yeah, it's just come out. Yeah, it's called Turbine Syndrome, and it's hard to explain, because it kind of is going to unfold over a period of time. So to kind of give it the overall kind of arc now is to spoil it a bit. But it's ostensibly, to use a $2 word, about a small kind of town village that's kind of, it's a touristy place. It's a place that people would go through the summer. So it kind of has a two-tone to its kind of identity, in that it has its, you know, indigenous people who live there the entire time, and then it's kind of flux in. So it has a kind of an identity crisis, in a sense, that it's within that there's a key group of people who, I suppose, are up against certain challenges that are representation of bigger challenges. And it's all about layers, in that even from the people in it, to the themes, to the kind of idea of what's stuff that's happening. You know, there's modernity is coming to this kind of village, in the sense of that there's these wind turbines, you know, of the Turbine Syndrome of the title, are being introduced, and it's kind of disturbing people. There's it's around a historical, you know, kind of megalithic site that has elements. There's elements of old modernity, and then, you know, whatever is the new modernity and stuff, and then just kind of people's struggles, I suppose, within that, and the struggles for meaning in the in a period of time at the end of Western civilization, in the sense that it seems that at this point, the arc of Western civilization, we're definitely out of the growth spurt, and we're, you know, into the kind of downward decline, and how that, you know, how realizing that that the myth of progress is a myth, in that, you know, that we're not definitely going up, echoing what we were talking about earlier about, you know, to follow your bliss and follow your blisters, and, you know, you're kind of turning up and hoping that, well, I have my shiny thing, you know, and then realizing, oh, hold on, I've been defining myself in a completely wrong way.
Yeah.
And how we're all going to cope with that, and I suppose in a sense by defining ourselves as what we think Western culture is, and our place in it, and, you know, that's comes out into, I suppose, socially, culturally, religiously, mythically, all of these type of words. So it's as much, I suppose, a microcosm of the macrocosm that is the world that we're going. And that's the best way I can describe it without telling you stuff.
Yeah,
that's,
no,
you know,
it sounds really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds really, really deep, with lots of possibilities.
But I mean, having said all that, it's about 4 or 5 people and their day-to-day lives. It's a soap opera. So I mean,
Yes.
it's not this heavy tome of, you know, abstract ideas, whatever. It's people's actual lives and stuff, and, you know, it's kind of with some horror elements and some woo-woo elements, and all that type of stuff. Yeah,
we'd expect that.
Sure. Yeah. What else would I do? Yeah.
That's good. Well, thanks, Tom. That's a really, really great chat, actually.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that chat.
Nice to meet you as well. Well, meet you. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
And there we are. Look, on cue. I'm sitting in an office here, which is occasionally we get a phone call.
Right. It's like, who rings on landlines? Whoa, what is this? What is this witchcraft?
The telling bone, whatever it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was what we used to say. That's great. Well, best of luck with everything. And
thank you very much.
I look forward to hearing your next podcast, as always.
Thank you very much. They're always fun to do. So
yeah,
and definitely, if you're up for doing this again, I would.
Really
enjoy the chat, and I'm sure we could talk for hours about any amount of things. We only kind of raise the surface in a lot of these kind of topics.
We certainly could, and I'll put all the stuff on the show notes, because I never chance to write things down when people go, "Oh, my email address is blah," or whatever.
Yeah, my favorite hobby is telling people I'll put all these links in the show description and then not doing it. That seems to be my magnum opus. That's my great work. That's my contribution to human society, is reneging on promises of links.
Right. No, I will put yours in there, as long as you give me the links. No, I'll find them if you don't.
No, I should be able to do that.
So thanks.
I think that's within my ability.
All right, mate. See you then.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye. Big thanks to Tommie. And you really do need to check out Tommie's work, and particularly his podcast, Adventures in Woo Woo. It's absolutely hilarious, as well as being really interesting. So, so as always, you know, I always say that was a great interview and really enjoyed it, but that was such fun, and sort of veered off into territory I don't normally go into. So, until next time. See you then.